Right, well, we're here to talk about the return project for Splore, and it was retitled, or should I say it's titled the Splore Portavilion 2012, and it was a true collaboration. It was a true coming together of a whole big group of people from a whole bunch of different areas and really putting all of our heads together into one big project. It was ourselves Cut Collective, which consists of Trust Me, Component, M-Force One, myself, I think, Peep Show, Tosh Monster, who's also the glue that holds us together, and we had a special guest artist called Gasp, who's another guy who works with us quite a lot. So already we started with a big base of people, so there was already a big group of us when we started the collaboration, and that is what you get with a collective. So then what we did is we teamed up with an architect who we'd brought on board, who we'd worked with before, whose name was Jasper Middleton, and he was the one who was able to do all the renders and get the whole thing into shape, all the stuff that we couldn't do basically because we're just, you know, artists. And then we were then introduced to this wonderful person called Emma Underhill from the UK. Now, Emma was in the UK, Jasper was in France at this point, so a lot of it was about communicating via other means as opposed to just being able to, you know, the old school technique of talking to someone. We had to actually converse through the media highway. So there was lots of Skyping, there was lots of that kind of communication going. So Emma came on board and she brought her ideas and her energy to it as well. And then of course the whole thing, because it was all being overseen by Splore and by the people at Splore, namely Amanda and Mark, who really kind of oversaw the whole thing and brought all of these crazy different factions together at the end in one place, which was the Splore Portavilion, and that's the collaboration, and that's how it all came about to start with.
Now, if we go back a little bit, Splore and Cut Collective have a bit of a history together. We've done projects twice there before this one. In 2008, we made essentially 3D puzzle boxes, which were painted on each side and scattered around different places throughout the whole festival, with the idea being that public could interact with them, take them apart, reassemble them in different ways, create sculptures, or, if so inclined, put them back together. So they were quite successful, and then the next time we went back to Splore, this is 2010, was our first time collaborating with our friend Jasper Middleton, the architect. Now Jasper brings something to the table that isn't part of our repertoire. He's quite a modernist at heart, really. He loves clean lines, clear facades, and quite clever. Works really well with angle and perspective, and actually thinks three-dimensionally, which is lucky given he's an architect, but something that we aren't used to doing so much. So he really worked with us on this twisting, warped tunnel that was kind of like a passageway on the arts trail at Splore. We dressed the inside and worked with the Splore lighting crew to light it at night to give it a whole nother element. So it was the 2012 project was really an extension of that sort of, first project.
But an explosion of it in a way. It was a much larger scale.
So the path that got us to working on Splore in 2012 was an interesting one. It started with Amanda Wright, the co-director of Splore, seeing online work that Emma Underhill of Up Projects had been doing. Up Projects have been running an ongoing project called Portavilion for a few years, since 2008 actually. And what that's about is really creating temporary public installations that just pop up in neighborhoods or areas within communities that are really about facilitating the communities that use those areas and providing platforms for performance or workshops or just general play. Amanda was quite taken by the idea and the whole ethos behind the Portavilion and thought it fit really nicely with Splore. So essentially she commissioned Emma to bring Portavilion to Splore. The missing component there was someone on the ground here in New Zealand to execute the project, and there was a bit of a call for tender, and it was taken up by a third party. And while this was all happening, Cut Collective had submitted our own application to the Arts Trail, like we have 2 times prior. Based off what we'd done last time with Jasper, it had expanded, it was bigger. We were thinking about palettes and modular design, and we were quite far along in our thinking. What happened was the Portavilion project kind of fell over or hit a wall when the third party couldn't come through. So I think Mark Osborne, the director of the visual arts on Splore, had a moment where he saw our application and saw what the Portavilion project was about, and it really just
fit together
sense.
perfectly. Yeah.
So we got on board with about 6 or 7 weeks before the festival to engage with Emma as the curator, Mark is the director of visual arts, Amanda is the co-director of the festival, Jasper is our collaborator as an architect who would be responsible for the main design, and Gasp as an additional artist to work with us in dressing the whole thing.
So yeah, so that was how it all came about. What is it? What is this thing that we're talking about? What was it that came about? I guess that's the question. So what happened is, like we said, Jasper had done some initial sketches, and the benefit about having an architect on board means you've got someone to basically do renders, create visuals that can really see something in 3D. So he'd already come up with some ideas for it and did some initial renders, and so what we took is from then, and when we were then realized, okay, we've got a much larger scale, why not, let's see if we can explode the whole thing, make it all a lot bigger. Let's turn it into a Portavilion from just simply a little portable structure that would be part of the art trail.
I guess we were looking at going from a sculpture to
something that people can actually interact with and live in. Yeah. So we saw this stack of pallets. Now Jasper had said pallets are cool, and we'd said pallets are cool, and then we saw this stack of pallets, and we were just thinking, right, well, let's integrate the pallets. So basically what we had is we had this idea of pallets, and then we had a site. We had this beautiful spot right next to the water, looking out across the Firth of Thames, and we thought, right, well, what we need to do is combine the two, So basically we went, visited the location, and then what was it? We went from Tapapakanga straight to Papakura to a pallet warehouse.
Yeah, and you go there and there's stacks of pallets like 3 stories high. It's really evident once you get there on site what you can actually do. You can build with these things without any trouble at all. The pallet for us was really integral in a way, because what we liked about it was what it represents. As a conceptual reference point, the pallet is like an empty vessel. It's an empty vessel of a shipping vessel, which is normally used to ship goods, food items, basically consumable and disposable stuff all around the world for people to consume. So it's really a vessel for a cycle of consumption, which generates a whole lot of byproduct and waste. The pallets just being one little aspect of that, and we saw an opportunity to take the pallet with the empty vessel and give it life beyond its role, and see if we could elevate it into something much greater.
Yeah, so we took this pallet. So we really liked the concept of the pallet and that whole delivery vehicle. So we were thinking, well, let's use that and upcycle it. Let's essentially turn it from something that is an everyday consumable object that people don't even look twice at, into something that is beautiful and something that is rich and something you could engage with. So we got Jasper to do up some wonderful initial renders, some great ideas of how it could work. And at this point, this is simply 3D renders. There's no way we know whether or not it's going to work, how it's going to work. And at this point, let me say, at no point throughout the whole project did we ever really know what it was going to look like, how it was going to function. It was, the whole way through, it was all theoretical. And the only time that we ever really knew whether or not it was going to work and that it did work was when we were standing back looking at the finished product. So we were really just thinking, how could this possibly work in this particular site? And so we went through some really nice renders. And again, trying to keep true to Emma's ethos of the Portavilion, but also trying to keep true to Jasper's clean-edged architects, and then knowing at the back of our mind at some point the whole thing was going to just kind of blow out and there would be things hanging over the edges, and we knew, knowing that we were going to have to put our stamp on it too. So again, all of these collaborators had to come together at some point, all with quite different concepts. So at every point we really had to assure each other that that all of those areas was going to achieve what they wanted to.
For us, we want to make sure it looks good visually, because that's what we do. So between these different stakeholders, we managed to find a way to work ourselves forward. But you got to keep in mind, we're talking about 500 pallets here. There is no way we can test build this thing at that scale anywhere. There was a lot of faith required by all parties.
Yeah, so we had the structure. So we had the concept of the structure. We got to sign off on that loosely. So then we had to figure out, right, well, how can we bring a visual element into this? And this is where the kind of second phase of the concept came in, and where we were able to address this idea of the pallet as a delivery vehicle, or the pallet as a offshoot or a byproduct of the consumer society. Why don't we take it from another angle and say, right, well, what's another part of consumer society that we deal with and have to deal with every day, which is the visual aspect, the selling point, the point of contact, the way we are completely saturated every day by this visual noise out there in the world of trying to sell something. Why not let's take that concept and see if we can apply that. And then when we were considering this, it's like, well, that's horrible, not a very particularly nice aesthetic, this visual noise. Why not let's take it back and take it back to a time when selling something was done by hand, was painted, and it was actually a craft and an art form. So why not let's apply old school signage to new school or this same subject that we were dealing with, and use that as the delivery vehicle for this second kind of conceptual part to the project.
Yeah, so we were looking at, it's essentially, vintage signwriting, handmade signwriting, and the qualities of it, the imperfections, the organic nature, and the homemade qualities too. So it's not about highly finished, perfectly executed technical paintings. It's more about capturing the nostalgic essence of these works.
So it was actually dirtying up the art. The whole exercise for us was, how do we make this look old? How do we make it look like it's been around for a long time? So we were using techniques of sand underneath spray paint to create this weird texture so that it looks like it's been there for ages and so on. So it was actually a really exciting process. So we just literally, sitting in our studio, we just started painting. We just started painting characters, started painting words, anything that was in some way related to the concept. And it was weird because every day something else would appear and we'd be like, oh, are you going to chuck that? And yeah, I really like this old character from this advertising that I saw in the 50s, or this old advertising campaign. And it meant that we got to really start painting again by hand without using spray paint.
Yeah, which is a pretty big departure for us from over the last few years, where it has been generally spray paint. So the production of the actual artwork for this project was pretty intensive. We just grew piles of artwork. We're working with recycled materials, a lot of floorboards and pieces of timber that have been discarded. We've taken up a lot of disassembled pallets that have been nailed back together to provide canvases for us. That we had all this signage on wood, hard, splintery, rough surfaces, the idea was that these elements are going to dress the structure that
Again,
Jasper was working on.
Didn't know how it was going to work. We just got it all together and knew that we'd be chucking it on there at some
We knew
point.
if we made enough of it in a strong enough style that it's going to work, the application of it to the structure would be dealt with on site. And that's just faith that you have in your own experience and those around you. One other aspect of this part of the process, the studio process, was deciding we needed to address the harsh qualities of pallets
and wood.
Timber. If people are meant to be interacting with this structure, lounging, relaxing, sleeping or playing, we need to give them a bit of comfort there. So we started a production line of pillows. We created artwork for screen print, then printed whole rolls of fabric, which were then cut up as patterns and then sewn up as cushion covers. So we produced something like 150 cushions through the studio period to support all the timber.
And then another aspect we had to start considering, again, we were considering the structural side of it, which was strong, had to be strong, hard edge. Then we had to consider what about the soft part of it where people would have to be comfortable. But then again, the whole Up Project's Portavilion part was, right, people have to interact with it. It's going to be outdoors, it's going to be sunny, they'll be there at night. There's plenty of things that could happen. So we had to consider some kind of cover, some kind of shade cloth. We had to consider some kind of protection from the rain if it started to rain. So again, we had to consider very functional things too, which aren't things that we're not used to considering when you make art. You don't really have to worry about the function. So again, it was really interesting for us to be able to consider how it was actually going to be able to be interacted with once we got to the site. And that was it. Once we had all of that together, we thought, right, we were ready. And then time came about and we were like, let's hit the site. So we hit the site and we began unpacking all the pallets.
Yeah, so once on site, you've got the scenario where you've got beautiful flat piece of grass next to a freshwater lagoon that empties on into the Firth of Thames on the beach. It's an idyllic spot, pretty awe-inspiring. And a truck arrives with 250 pallets, and that's only half of them. You need a fork hoist to take them off, and it just drops stacks of 20 pallets in piles, and then off it goes. And this is like a crucial moment where the accuracy of Jasper's planning and work is really tested, because if we don't get the footing of this thing right, if we don't get the structural foundation of this thing right, and we plan to build up, and plan to have people amongst it, sitting in it, sleeping in it, whatever, it could be quite a dangerous thing. So having Jasper on site, he's been working away in Paris for the last 6 weeks.
He shows up a day before or something. He's like, right, straight on site.
On site. Now, there's something to be said actually for the collaborative aspect of working at a long distance, between London, Paris, and Auckland. Getting on site was the first opportunity we had to actually meet Emma and meet with Jasper. We met Jasper before, but not for a couple of years. So, and having all parties involved on site meant you could actually have a fluent conversation all at the same time, without delay, without lag, without weird hours of the day and night for everyone.
So almost the first time that all three factions had really come together. And I guess you could say that was the first part where we could actually really start to see what was going to happen and know, because of the attitudes and the energy that was brought by all three parts, know that it was going to work. We knew at that point, when we had them in place and it started going up, we knew it was going to work because everyone had worked so hard on their particular part of the process.
Yeah. Now the actual build of this thing was a pretty interesting process itself. I mean, we had a very accurate floor plan for the first couple of layers of pallets. They went down, the grass field wasn't completely level, so we had to deal with that. Once we've got a couple of layers of the structure level and secure, we can just basically start to build upwards. Then that works for a certain amount of time to get to the customized pieces that start to curve and overhang, and you create these cubby holes and points of interest which break out of a basic block building structure. Once we've got the first couple of layers down for the structure, which had to be really accurate, it's just a matter of stacking and building up. But once you get to a certain point there, and you start to hit the areas where in the design you've got curves and overhangs and cubby holes and breakout spaces, a lot of it was sort of done on the fly, because whereas before you're just stacking piles, this has to be then slowly move into a regular stacking, and actually was something we hadn't anticipated. The mental challenge of that was actually quite intense. So, you know, it was a process that was incredibly physical and also incredibly mentally challenging.
So we'd got to the point where it was like all the structure was made, the clean lines were there, and then we had all this big pile of art. We're like, okay, so what are we going to do? So then we had to dress it. So it went from this very clean thing, which Jasper would have been very happy to this. And in the sign making that we made, we always had this thing in the back of our mind, which was shanty town, like a built up area, a slum. And so we took this very clean shape, this wonderful blocky thing, and turned it into a shanty town that had overhangs coming out, had bright colors, and was all very unorganized and well, there was organization in the disorder, and we created some kind of, because we needed to make it visually interactive as well. We needed it to draw people in and people want to hang out there. So we were able to then apply all of the signage that we'd made to the structure and give it life and really kind of start to give it energy, which I think, like I said, was what made people feel like it was part of, you know, that they were part of it. It was like, it made it really approachable and made people just want to come and hang out there, you know. And then the crazy thing was, we put it all on, we all stood back. It was like, right, well, Explore starts now. So we stand back and all of a sudden people just started interacting with it and looking at it, taking photos and hanging out and sitting on cushions.
The missing part of the entire equation was we didn't really understand until the festival opened, and it's all very good and well to design and build this structure, but at the heart of it, it was meant to provide a space and a place for people to interact with and use for whatever they needed. And it wasn't until that started to happen that we understood that actually was the end point for us. When people were doing, you know, you had a couple of hundred people doing yoga in a concentric circle around our structure.
We had given it back. We had handed it over to them. It was now theirs, not ours. And we were able to just stand back and watch it, you know, and appreciate it, which was really rewarding. And the most rewarding part to it, in a way, I mean, you know, it was certainly not for financial gain that we took a project on like this. It was much more for to see what we could create out of it and to see how people would respond to that. And like I said, that was the reward. That was where we really got to feel like, wow, this actually works. We never knew all the way through whether or not it was actually going to work. And so during the day you had people sunbathing, people doing yoga, doing Pilates. Then at night there was, you know, wasted people walking around going, wow, this is amazing. There were performances going on.
Interactive workshops.
Pallets became rafts in the in the lagoon, and people were sunbathing on it, and it really became this organic thing.
The last, I mean, it was also very interesting to note, like, you know, all along you think of the structure, and we've been to Explore many times, and we know what it involves and how the different stages you go through and how you feel. And one of those, the things you can't remove from the whole equation is how things function at night. And without, you know, the support from the Explore crew, and Peter in particular, who's in charge of all the lighting, the nighttime aspect wouldn't have been anything like it was. I mean, you know, we had an incredible generosity of spirit through this whole thing that extended to the lighting of the Portavilion, which took it to a whole nother level, actually.
But yeah, I mean, a very rewarding project, something that was, you know, it felt so worth doing, so enjoyable to work with such a big bunch of people. So good to be able to document it. We documented the whole thing on a Tumblr, set up a Tumblr for it. So it's all documented. You could see the steps and how it worked. And I mean, yeah, like I said, the most rewarding bit was being able to step back, knowing that it's no longer this collaboration's, you know, we no longer own it. it is now owned by, you know, the people of Splore, and from what we could see, it was, you know, highly enjoyed and interacted with, and, you know, hopefully we'll get to do it again sometime.
Sure.
So yeah, that was it. Thank you very much.